Hello everybody, welcome back to your favorite science channel on YouTube. Sensorality, kicking it right off. If you're watching this series, you know what it is. Trying to figure out our axiomatic definition for sensorality, separating that concept into two distinct words, two distinct definitions, sensorality with a C and with an S. And so today we're going to start off just by saying we can define, and we're not at the final axiomatic definition, but what definitions or what things just altogether can we say about the difference between sensorality with a C, inanimate objects that filter things based off of physical properties, electricity, magnetism, mechanical analogs such as mass, versus sensorality with an S, sentient objects making choices, the ability to have a personality, the ability to identify yourself, the ability to control your own motion within bounds. Again, I can't learn to fly, but I can choose to walk to the refrigerator. And so we're just trying to figure out the difference. Our base is sensorality, our middle ground is speciality, differentiation, and now we're trying to define what sensorality is. Operative word for sensorality with a C, and the connecting intuition is the word filtration. To filter something is to censor, both with an S and with a C. And then we have to connect that to the operative word differentiation, or differentiate, or some form of that in speciality, and then we will have our definition. But that day is still not today. So what can we say? We'll start with our basis, sensorality, a C. And so again, remember, in typical mathematical notation, we'll say sensorality with an S contains sensorality with a C. Remember, these are sets of all concepts in any word that can be related to this word, and how they are related is what we're articulating. So sensorality with a C, right? The current use of the word censorship. People they'll use it exactly incorrectly. Censorship with a C for censorship with an S. But the word censorship, again, specific to, people don't say sensorality and they don't say censor. Well, they do say censor, but censorship is a more relevant word. And I'm sure you could look it up on Google how often it is used, or again, the frequency of these things. You can see these iteration frequencies, already. If you need to learn to functionally get around another language, you only need to learn 25 different verbs or whatever, some prepositions and nouns. And so even though there's thousands and thousands and thousands of words in different languages, you only need so many because they're used so often and they apply to different things. The context defines a variable. If you say, I want that, that is one statement. The syllability, the number of syllables, anything that relates to how to construct a syllable, the number of the syllables, that's what syllability is. It's the same thing, but it applies to different things depending on the context. It says, it is that, now I'm looking at a pool table, it is that, that's a desk, it is that, it's a table. So we're trying to build the context to ask the right question, to elicit the word, the operative word. And when you look at my dichotomistic pairs, all of the things in brackets are operative words. So again, take any book, for whoever's watching this, think of a book you read and you liked that's nonfiction, and you learned something from it. There was a single line or a single paragraph or a single point, and that was really insightful for you, it stuck with you, and it really provided you some novelty or something to think about, and to grow and to learn. Okay, so operative words. And so you read that book and you get that one line, or just, even before we get to that, you read a sentence, or you listen to someone speak, the word they emphasize naturally in conversation. That is going to be the operative word, right? It doesn't matter what you say, it matters how you say it. Well, in reality, it does matter what you say, and it really matters how you say it. So our operative words, when I'm doing my dichotomistic pairs, I'm literally jumping around from every operative word that could be had in a conversation that would use that word. I can just think of the context and the words come to me naturally. And so again, that's the secret sauce I have. I was just born this way, I don't know. Fun stuff. It's been really useful so far. But sensorality contains sensorality. Sensorality with an S contains sensorality with a C. The universe builds its intrinsic properties. It emerges. It becomes more beautiful, more intricate. But sensorality with an S, just the words that we use, anything that relates to sensorality with an S, we have sense, right? Human senses. I sense this. I sense the air. I have smell, touch, sight. Again, we've covered that. I only think there's really two, getting back to our fundamental stability of two. Sentient, sentience, and just word forms that are used every day. Again, always referring to, again, we've used a working definition of sentient for sensorality. Obviously, linguistically, I think the letters are very similar. but it's just obviously part of the same word family. What's the exact connection? Don't know. Sensor. This one is not used correctly. Again, when I have my microwave making a face at me like this, when it says it has sensor cooking with an S, that is our problem. That is the wrong word. That is sensor with a C. My microwave does not make choices for itself. It can't self-identify. It can't move independently. And so, a sensor, again, remember we use sensorality becomes personality. Your individuality, and even more general than that, individuality, any organism, the same way a dog is not a person, but it still has individuality. So that's immediately generalizable in entirety. But we can just say a sensor is a person, right? We talked about our fingers, now our whole body's a sensor. And it is. It's just to learn to become more efficient. But now what we've done is we've created, who cares? Sensor with S-E-N-S-E-R. We've created, by our own definitions and just iterating language, we've produced a fundamental dichotomistic pair that is completely logically inconsistent. What do I mean? Well, what I said is what I just mean, but sensor with an ER doesn't make any sense. Because remember we said sensors in animate objects end in ER. So the only correct word would be sensor, C-E-N-S-E-R. And again, you never differentiate this in spoken word because it's the exact same letters, or not the exact same letters, but the exact same sound and the exact same phonetic pronunciation. The same pronunciation and the same enunciation. And it's just like, okay, awesome. But you can't see the difference in these things, but logically there is a difference. So sensor, C-E-N-S-E-R, is logically consistent, and sensor, S-E-N-S-E-R, is inconsistent. So those do not exist. And conversely, the reciprocal to that would be sensor, C-E-N-C-E-N-S-O-R, does not exist either, right? Because then you can't have personality in a rock. Sensor, your microchip is not going to tell you about how much he likes the Lakers or the snowboarding competition that happened last week. And so we've eliminated words. And again, all of this just comes together again, just piling a bunch of facts and empirical evidence, and then the answer will just pop out. So again, so is a form of sensorality, right? I typically don't go down that far into just two unless it's insightful, and in this case it is, because you do have to connect that logically and show the evolution from the one and the two, but nobody else out there. And again, when is somebody else going to do a proof at this level? I don't know if it's really possible to have the intuition I do, because I've already done it. And so anybody else that would come after would know, and they wouldn't have to go through the nitty-gritty as much as I have. But a form of so is sensor, and so when you axiomatic, because remember you have to show the complete iteration of syllability, every syllable used in a sentence, and there's a lot of prepositions that are used in them. Again, we're trying to eliminate all prepositional phrases and anything that isn't a noun verb, really just a noun and a verb, but we have to iterate the entire logical structure of that word to create it, make it become an axiom. So is a part of sensorality with an S, S-O, S-E-N-S-O-R-L-I-T-Y. Other working definitions we've currently used and still playing around with. Word, sensorality is a word. We showed that. That was a poignant result. Feeling, persons have feelings. Sentience can feel. Right? Sentience is kind of more related to consciousness, but consciousness is related to feeling. Right? Our basis is feeling. We've used the definition of attraction. That's how we enveloped gravity. Is right. Sensorality is anything that attracts. Speciality differentiates. Sensorality attracts. Filtration. Right now now we've created another thing. Well, now then we would say a filter as a person. Right. If you're filtering information as a person or as a sentient being or as somebody who has the capacity to self-identify, then you're a filtor, like an F-I-L-T-O-R. Literally, I rented a storage unit to put my house stuff in, and they said I'm the lessee, and the storage place is the lessor. And so now we have ER versus OR. Now we have the sound E versus the sound OR. And that's very typical. Somebody leasing something else to somebody else is the lessor, and the person receiving that lease or that lending or that loan is the lessee. So again, that that sound E coming back into it, more dynamics like that. Again, showing order. Who is the basis? Who is lending what to who? To whom? As an English speaker, I generally don't know the right usage of who and whom. So again, I can derive an axiom and I still don't know basic facets of English. And so, but again, language is such a huge thing. Once you really get how broad and just the implications of this, what I've done, it's a mind fuck every day. But we've created, again, sensor with, censor is not with the, okay, so we went with the S's. Now with the C's, same kind of thing. Again, censorship with the C is the word that you use, but it's used incorrectly. It is sensorality with a C is senseless. Then we have censor, C-E-N-S-E-R, that is not used, that is not a word. Or no, that is the word, right? Censor, because the ER would pair to the inanimate object. And again, as I identified in the lecture, we talked about that more. It's not completely consistent either. It's not like everything that ends in ER is an inanimate object, and everything that ends in an OR is guaranteed to be a human being, or something that refers to sentience or self-identification. And so again, is that just because again, I just keep, when I say iteration, I think of an assembly line with a finite amount of elements, and you just have to keep, it comes out the other side, and it comes out the other side, just like we showed with solidarity, producing solidarity into darity, and it just keeps going and going and going. And so maybe the ER versus the OR is just professions or things that people have done a lot longer, right? Like a programmer is, right, it's an ER, it's kind of old, it's newer. Again, something's going on there. I don't even know what to say about it. Moving on. We can also, we've connected it, we talked about filter, but right now we also have another, right, here's a big one that's already identified in society, in ontology. Subjective versus objective. Sensorality is subjective, right? We talked about big on the identity. The only reference frame you have ever had is you. The only reference frame I have ever had is me. So everything is subjective, right? Existence is not, but everything to a person is subjective because you are a person. And so you're trying to be objective, you're trying to limit your speciality as much as you can, your desire to differentiate. You're trying to be objective. You're trying to be normal in the sense of objective. Normal is objective. You can't, again, you get to a point where you can't break down the logic anymore. But that is kind of, again, because people always talk about subjective versus objective. Sensorality with a C is objective. It is literally about objects. Sensorality with an S is about, is the subject. It is literally about people, and the subject is a person. But we also use, right, stupidity. Like a table can't be stupid. But you can call a table stupid, and what have we just recreated or derived? Personification, right? So if you say, right, and now we have, and so, again, I was going to say one thing, that sensorality with an S contains sensorality with a C, so sensorality with an S is broader, but we're not going to go through sensorality with a C because it's just the inverses to those things. We kind of just discussed it anyway. But we have a fundamental, cross-multiplication, logical, dichotomistic pair thing. So I just have it in brackets, and it'll be on the screen if you're just listening. But I just have personification and objectification as a dichotomistic pair, and then sensorality with an S and sensorality with a C as another dichotomistic pair. All right? Remember, if you personify sensorality with a C, you're objectifying it. And if you objectify sensorality with an S, you're personifying it. All right? So if I say my table is sad, it's not sad, I'm personifying that table. And if I say that woman is a piece of meat, I'm objectifying that woman. And so it's kind of a cool logical cross multiplication thing there. But seriously, logically, there's something very fundamental. Because I used to remember always being in high school and I could always reduce to every math problem or physics problem to a fraction. And it was why the fuck is cross multiplication so lethal in this game, yo? But something is going on there for real and legitimately. So, like I said, we have that dichotomistic pair, sensor, S-E-N-S-E-R, and then sensor, C-E-N-S-O-R. and we're saying those do not exist. We have not proven that completely logically yet because of the iteration of does it reference a person or not, ER, OR, suffixes. Don't know what to do with that there. Just keep moving on. Construct, deconstruct. Remember, you can't destroy anything. Physically, matter isn't created or destroyed, it changes form. You can go change into energy, stabilize into mass. Change into energy, stabilize into mass. So you construct something and then you deconstruct something. But in the same way that you learn something and you are part of the universe, so does the universe. And so once the universe learns a property or stabilizes a property, it can't forget it. It doesn't go away. That is your conservation laws again. But so that's what we're doing linguistically and logically with words. Is we're building up a definition, we're building up a context, and we're reducing it. But we're going to build it up farther than we can reduce back to. Right? In the same way you can't get yesterday back, but you did something yesterday that helped you today. You're going to build up, 2 step forward, 1 step back. 2 step forward, 1 step back. That's what we're doing logically with language. Constructing and deconstructing until we get to that final breakdown of logic where it can't go any farther. Finishing up here, I'll just say stories with lies fall apart. Right? There's a famous, I don't know if it's Mark Twain, but somebody says the easiest way to remember all the lies you tell is not to tell one. Again, that's paraphrased, but the point being is if you don't tell a lie, you don't have to remember it. And so over time, those inconsistencies will come out. And that requires no convincing it's true, everyone knows that. But stories with truth do not, right? That's why you have the person that gets falsely accused of rape and murder gets sentenced to 30 years wrongly. And what do you say? What do you say when you tell the truth and people just don't listen? What do you do when people cannot accept the statement of a fact? I've dealt with that firsthand at every level of severity my entire life. What do? There's nothing you can do. But stories based on truth do not fall apart because they can't. But truth is preserved, right? And so we've proven the preservation of pronunciation, and now we've proven the preservation of truth. And that is a complete proof. But sensorality determines inconsistency. In total generality. Again, I just have speciality over to the side, remembering to connect it with differentiation, but we already discussed that. I have a bunch of cool points here. I'm probably going to cut it here, continue recording, but I'm going to call it there for today. And so that is our biggest thing. Remember, we ended last time as a sensor is a switch. Sensorality switches. But now, kind of the thing I want you to have in your head is that we've had that identification. Subjective versus objective is a differentiation that it directly relates to the differentiation of sensorality. Clearly, you have subjective with an S. Objective doesn't start with a C, but we have the objectification and personification that is very clear as to what people are doing. And it's a logical unwinding. It's a cross multiplication of logic. So thank you for watching, and let's keep going.